Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to the BhagavatSanga program. The current theme that we have been discussing or that has been being presented for a few weeks is Lord Kapila Dev describing the beautiful form of the Lord, the Supreme Lord. And the verses that relate to that are from Canto 3, chapter 28, verses 21 through 33. And today we have a wonderful devotee, Roshan Prabhu, giving the presentation, and he's going to share his realization as well. So, Hare Krishna, Roshan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna devotees.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you, devotees, for giving me the opportunity to read this wonderful section of Srimad Bhagavatam. So I think we are discussing from the teachings of Lord Kapila. Brief background is that there's a discussion going on between Kapila Dev and his mother Devahuti, so it starts in 25th chapter, where Devahuti, after Kadama Muni has taken sannyas, she's kind of disturbed, and then she presents this question to Kapila Muni, saying that I'm generally agitated and disturbed by my material senses, and because of engagement with the material senses, I've kind of fallen into ignorance. So I know that I'm disturbed, but I don't know the way out. So please suggest a path outside of it. And then that is where the conversation starts. And then 26th chapter is actually Kapila Dev doing analytical study of material nature, Sankhya. So where he discusses all the 25 elements that kind of comprise the material nature. And then there is description of how the cosmic being is awakened and importance of supersoul. And then in 27th chapter is when Kapila Muni starts describing how is it that living entity, who is by nature transcendental to material nature, gets entangled with material nature by identifying with material body and therefore absorbing in the material activities with the mentality of being the enjoyer and doer and trying to lord over the material nature, how he gets entangled. And then the overall experience of living entity is that it experiences a lot of misery, a lot of stress in the material world. And therefore the question comes of how do we disentangle ourselves from this material absorption. So living entity is by nature transcendental, but because of ignorance, it thinks that it is entangled in material nature, and therefore it experiences misery, happiness and misery, predominantly misery. And then 28th chapter starts with Kapila Muni trying to describe the way out of how to disentangle ourselves from material nature and how do we establish ourselves in our original position as servant of Krishna, which is a position transcendental to dualities and miseries of this world. And so this chapter basically describes kind of the Ashtanga Yoga, not exactly devotional service, but Ashtanga Yoga, which is also a part of devotional service. But as Prabhupada compares in this chapter, that it is a path which is generally more difficult, and a recommended path for it, as is again described in 29th chapter. So in that context, in 28th chapter, as part of Ashtanga Yoga, Kapil Muni first describes all the do's and don'ts, other regulative principles of Ashtanga Yoga, so that mind is generally calm and controlled. For that, he discusses all the yamas, which is basically rooted in non-violence. So non-violence, truthfulness, non-possessiveness, celibacy, and then he discusses the niyamas or the do's or the prescriptions that's part of Ashtanga Yoga, which includes things like cleanliness and then deity worship, reading scriptures, doing austerities, things like that. And then he says that after yama and niyama, you do some yogic posture, which is basically that you can sit comfortably in steady position for a long time, and then breathing practices to control the mind. And then once the mind is thus pacified and controlled and the gross impurities of mind and disturbances have been calmed, then he starts describing how one should then focus the mind on Krishna, which is samadhi, samadhan, which is basically like how do you focus the mind on Krishna. And so the elaborate process of meditation on form of Krishna is described. In that context, he describes, starting from verse 21 to 33, he describes the form of Krishna, starting with verse 21. So we can start from there. So verse 21 and 22, they discuss this. So one point that Prabhupada brings again and again is that in this chapter, it is discussed how a yogi should meditate on the form of Krishna in mind. But the same process, because it is difficult for us in the beginning stages, so exactly same form of Krishna is brought out in Archa Vigraha, following exactly same description which is given here. And therefore, for us, the same process that is described here, we can follow the same process in temple. So the process of taking darshan starts from the lotus feet of Krishna. So the first two verses describe the glories of Lord Vishnu's lotus feet, mainly describing that it starts with Sat Chintayet Bhagavatas Charnaravindam, which says that one should meditate on the lotus feet of Krishna, and it describes what are the benefits that accrues out of it, and the auspicious marks which are there on Krishna's lotus feet. Vajrankush, so there is thunderbolt, there is Ankusha, gold kind of, and then banner, lotus, and then we also know Shankh, Chakra, Gada, all those auspicious symbols which are there on the lotus feet of Krishna. Devotee should start meditating from there. And what it does is, it dispels the darkness of ignorance that is there in our heart, which is because of absorption in material activities. Because we have been absorbed in material world and material life for such a long time that we have become oblivious to our spiritual identity, and therefore this is compared to darkness of ignorance of our actual identity. That starts to get dispelled once we start meditating on lotus feet of Krishna. Prabhupada brings out in purport that how Mayavadis generally say that you can fix your mind on anything impersonal, but he says that very clearly here it is said that Krishna has a form, and a very well-defined form that a devotee yogi should start meditating on. Then the 22nd verse, it describes further describes the glories of lotus feet of Krishna, which is starting with the fact that Ganges river, which is so prominent for its ability to be able to wash sins, it derives all the good qualities from having washed the lotus feet of Krishna. And then Lord Shiva, who Shiva word itself means auspicious, so he has ability to grant auspiciousness to whoever worships Lord Shiva. He derives his ability to make everything auspicious because of having held Ganges on his head, which has washed lotus feet of Krishna. It reminds me of there's a song by Bhakti Vinod Thakur, Ekona Bhujinu Prabhu, Tomara Charane, where he essentially describes all of this glories of lotus feet of Lord, that it is from your lotus feet that Lord Shiva derives his Sivatva. It is your lotus feet that Narad Muni holds in his heart and goes around singing in ecstasy. It is from your lotus feet that Brahma worshipped so as to gain his creative powers. It is your lotus feet for which Lakshmi Devi performs austerity. So the benefits or the glories of lotus feet has been described throughout, but mainly in this verse it talks about how it has ability of dispelling the darkness and also destroying the mountains of sin that has accumulated in our heart from time immemorial. From there, one should then move on to the verse 23. It describes on how a meditator, a devotee, should then hold in his head the image of Lakshmi Devi, worshipping very carefully, massaging the lotus feet of Krishna. This is the picture that we have seen in temples and in temples and in a lot of calendar pictures of Lakshmi Devi massaging the lotus feet of Krishna. Also, it reminds me of the conclusion that Lakshmi Devi, representing wealth, should always be used in service of Narayan. That is the only way for us to gain auspiciousness out of Lakshmi or our wealth. Wealth utilized in any other way, generally, wealth is utilized for sense gratification. There's in the Vaishnav Bhajan, Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur says, Tomara Kanaka Bhogera Janaka. Wealth engenders propensity for sense enjoyment, and sense enjoyment ultimately results in, Prabhupada quotes very often, it causes nunam pramakta kurute vikarma. People who consider sense gratification to be the goal of their life, they actually end up being intoxicated or careless, and they tend to engage in vikarma, forbidden activities. And what that results in is that results in forces us to take bodies. It engages us in samsara, which is like it forces us to take he says, asannapi kleshada asadeha. So Rishabh Dev says that, in my opinion, one should not engage in sense gratification, na sadhu manye yad atmanoyam. Because of engagement in sense gratification, one gets this body, which, although temporary, is cause of material miseries. And therefore, one should not engage in sense gratification. And therefore, one should not use wealth to expand on sense gratification. But instead, wealth should be used in service of Krishna. That is one thing that a devotee should keep in mind while holding this picture of Lakshmi Devi massaging the feet of Lord Vishnu. And from there, then we move on to 24th verse talks about thighs and waist of meditation on thighs of Krishna, thighs of Lord Vishnu, which is described here as Ojas Nidhi, Uru Suparna Bhujayor Adhishobha Manav. So his thighs, which looks beautiful when he actually rides Garuda. So it looks very beautiful on the shoulders of Garuda. And it is Ojanidhi, which is, it is storehouse of all the energy. From there, one should then meditate generally on the dress, Vaikuntha dress, as Prabhupada describes, Pitambar, which covers all the way from waist all the way up to ankles. One should move, a meditating yogi should move his attention from thighs to the yellow silk dress of Lord Vishnu. And then from there, one moves his attention onto the navel, the abdomen region of the form of Lord, which is described in 25th verse as the Bhuvana Kosha, foundation of all the three worlds. So we have a lot of verses actually. The Gayatri Mantra also describes it as Bhur Bhuva Swaha Tat Savitur, that from which Bhur Bhuva and Swa emanate. So all the three worlds emanate. Janmadiyasya, the first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, Janmadiyasya Ato. Krishna is that from which everything comes. And all the material creation actually emanates from the abdomen or the navel of Krishna, from where the lotus stems, top of which is Brahmaji, and all the planetary system is in the stem of the lotus. So the yogi should meditate on navel and in general the abdomen area as the foundation of all three worlds of entire material creation. Then he should meditate on the nipples, Harin Mani Vrishastanayor, which is illuminated by the necklace in the neck of Lord Vishnu. So it is described here as emeralds, shining emeralds, which one should meditate on that. From there, then one should meditate generally on the chest region, which is described here as the storehouse of all the energies, all the creative energies, which is represented by goddess Mahalakshmi, and chest is described as the abode of Mahalakshmi, which basically signifies that it is the storehouse of creative maintenance and the destructive energy of Lord Vishnu. It is all stored in the chest region, and it is also source of great pleasure for meditating yogi. It is said that just by meditating on the chest, a yogi, at this point, he starts to derive great transcendental pleasure just meditating on the chest of Lord Vishnu. And then one moves on to neck. Neck is then again, it is with the famous Kaustuba jewel. Is neck of the Lord is said to enhance the beauty of Kaustuba jewel, which hangs around the neck of Lord Vishnu, which is described also in Damodar Ashtakam as Muhu Swasakampa Trirekanka Kantha. It is a soft, long neck adorned with 3 lines. That's a description of the neck. And then from there, it's recommended that we move our attention towards 4 arms, especially the holding chakra. It said that these 4 arms, they are source of energies for demigods that do administration of the universe. They derive their power from this long generally the arms of Vishnu Tattvas are described as long serpentine, extending all the way up till knees. Very attractive to mind, very pleasing to heart, and it is source of administrative power for all the demigods. And then it said one should also meditate on Sudarshan Chakra, which has thousands of wheels. One should meditate on all the wheels of Sudarshan Chakra. From here on, then there's Sudarshan Chakra, and then 28th verse talks about meditation on Gada, which is the instrument or the Ashtra, which is the weapon that Lord Vishnu uses to vanquish demons. So 28th verse describes Krishna's Gada, which is named as Kaumodaki, as being very dear to him, and it is always smeared with the blood of demons. So 2 kinds of living entities. Prabhupada usually classifies them as the devotees, who are known as devas, and those who are non-devotees or who do not obey the instructions of Krishna, and they are known as demons. And the weapon of Gada, club, is used to actually punish the demons, and is therefore it is always smeared with the blood of demons. And then there is also a garland of fresh flowers around the neck of Krishna, which is always surrounded by bumblebees, who are always attracted to the fresh flowers, of which his mala is made. So that is described, malam madhuvrata varutha giropubhushtam. And then it is described that he also has a pristine necklace, which represents devotees, pure devotees of Krishna, who are free from all blemish. They represent the necklace, whom Krishna actually keeps very close to his heart. So they adorn the neck of Lord Vishnu. And so 2 kinds of living entities that Prabhupada calls out in purport that is described here is one are the demons, who become at the receiving end of the club of Lord Vishnu, who are subdued by the club of Lord Vishnu, and devotees who adorn, whom Krishna keeps close to his heart and gives protection from the demons using his club. That is 28th. And then we move on to, from here on, 29 to 33 is where, so that's how we should, I've heard devotees recommend that even while taking darshan, this is how we should proceed. You start with the feet, then the thighs, then the abdomen region, then the chest, then the arms, and then the necklace, and then the different paraphernalia that he holds in his hands, chakra, gada, and then neck, and then you move on to face. So 29 to 33, it describes facial features of Lord Vishnu. And this is what gives a lot of joy and drives away all the miseries of devotees meditating on the face of Krishna. The 29th verse describes the general countenance. Sanchintayed bhagavato vadanaravindam yad visfuran makara kundala valgitena. So his ears are adorned with shark-shaped earrings, and that tends to illuminate his cheeks. Vidyotit amala kapolam udaranasham. So three facial features of Krishna is he has a very prominent nose, very beautiful prominent nose, and then his cheeks, which are illuminated by the shine of the earrings that he has, and then his countenance generally is very pleasing to heart. So one should start meditating on face, and then this another 30th verse gives an analogy for face of Krishna, of how pleasing it is to mind of yogis and devotees, that his face is compared to a lotus, and Krishna is also known as Keshav, one with beautiful long hairs. So his curly hairs, they are kind of like bumblebees humming around the lotus of his face, and his eyes are described as fish swimming about in the lake where the lotus is. And therefore it is said that one should it says Manomay. Here it says that Prabhupada says that this is a picture of Krishna carved out in the mind, but also the deity form. So one should meditate on the face of Krishna, which is like much more beautiful than a beautiful lake with lotus flower, bumblebees. It's much more, it puts the natural beauty to shame. It transcends even natural beauty and is very pleasing to the heart. Then 31st verse, it describes how one should meditate on the glance of Krishna and what the effect that it has on the hearts of devotees. Tasyavalokam adhikam kripaya ati ghor tapatraya upsamanaya nisrishtam akshanav. So Krishna's glance is described as one that is very merciful, and it quietens the fearful situation generated by this world, which is affected by tapat, the threefold miseries. Threefold miseries in this world tend to produce fear in the heart, and that is put to rest when one meditates on the glance of Krishna, which is extremely pleasing. And then his smile is also, it is said that he has a charming, loving smile, on which one should meditate in his heart for a really long time, and then that tends to produce bliss within the heart of meditating devotee. It is full of grace, vipula prasadam, and therefore one should meditate on it with devotion, with great devotion. In the 32nd verse, further describes the smile of Krishna. Hasam Hare Avanata Akhila Loka Tivra Sokashu Sagar Vishoshanam. The smile of Krishna has the ability to dry up the ocean of so in this world, because of the nature of this world, every living entity kind of is submerged in an ocean of tears, of lamentation. This world generally tends to produce fear and lamentation. If we have something, we are afraid of losing it. And if we don't have something or we lose something, it's lamentation. Because this world is temporary, we tend to lose things. That causes lamentation. However, looking at the smile of Krishna, that has the effect of drying up this ocean of tears that living entities in general are surrounded with. Atyudaram. It is extremely benevolent. And then Krishna's eyebrows are said to have special ability of attracting the Makaradhwaj or the Cupid. And one who meditates on the eyebrows of Krishna, he is relieved of the attraction of sensual attraction, which tends to entangle living entity and inflict him with further miseries. So one is a yogi, a meditating yogi, is protected from those attractions by steady meditation on the eyebrows of Krishna. And then the third verse, it talks about prahashtam, laughter of Krishna. It describes first the glance of Krishna, then smile, and then it's describing the laughter of Krishna, which tends to bring out his jasmine bud-like teeth, which shines further when he smiles. The reflection of his reddish lips and the bud-like teeth tends to illuminate his teeth, and it appears all the more attractive. Sort of freezing this image of Krishna in mind, one should meditate on it for a long time. And thus, with a devotion, when one meditates on this meditation tends to create disinterest for anything material in heart of devotee. And thus, because of this meditation, the cause of material misery, which is absorption in material activities and material objects, is automatically avoided, and thus the results of it, which is misery, is avoided. And Krishna, being Satchidananda Vigraha, form of bliss, meditation on that also produces bliss within the heart of yogi. Thus, steadily meditating on Krishna, one is able to avoid material miseries and establish himself in transcendental bliss. Yeah, I guess those are all the 33 verses. I think that's all, and we're also out of time. So thank you everyone for patiently listening. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Roshan Prabhu. That was a wonderful description of each of the features of the Lord. There are so many, right? And you started out the class with giving a reference of how this chapter, and in this chapter is mainly about Astanga Yoga, but the Astanga Yogi is also following the do's and don'ts. And then after a while, when he follows all those things, he comes to the point where he's able to control the mind, meditate, and with the controlled mind, he should meditate on the form of the Lord, which is you just described so nicely. And each of the forms have so many auspicious things related to each form. Each form has auspicious things related to each to them, like thighs, the dress, which is pitambar, the navel, represents the three foundation of all three worlds, and then the chest is the storehouse of creative energies. The neck, which is Kastuba jewel Krishna wears, and it enhances the beauty of the jewel. The Gada, Sudarshan Chakra, meditating on the wheels of the Sudarshan Chakra, and the Gada is smeared with the blood of the demons, and then Krishna is wearing a fresh garland. I mean, it's so many of them. I was trying to actually note them down because it's very nice to learn and hear again and again Krishna's beauty. It's always refreshing to hear anything about Krishna and his devotees. So thank you so much, Prabhu. You made a wonderful statement that meditating on Krishna's form and his special features, one is able to avoid all the material miseries. It's very important, especially for us in this Kali Yuga. So thank you so much, Roshan Prabhu, for the wonderful class. With that, devotees, we conclude today's presentation, and we'll meet again next Wednesday. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.